Hi, everyone. My name is Jenny Nguyen. I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. Thank you, yes. Not like Buc-ee's, right? First generation Vietnamese American and an only child. So for any of you guys who know other Asians and Asian families, just take that and distill it down to one person. And then you might get some semblance of like that kind of pressure. So early on, around the age of 5, I picked up a basketball. And it was my first true love. I really haven't put it down since. Shortly after that, I realized that I was a little different from everyone else in that when I was 6 years old, when we would line up to do jumping jacks in the morning, I always wanted to line up behind this one girl. She had long red hair, and when we did jumping jacks, it smelled like strawberry shortcake. It took me about a decade later to realize what that was, but I digress. So I learned early on that I loved playing basketball. My dad grew up playing soccer in Vietnam, so he was just like, oh, sweet, I have an athletic child. I'm gonna push her towards soccer. So he involved me in soccer, but every time the ball came near me, I picked it up and started dribbling. So clearly not my sport. My mom, on the other hand, kept repeating to me that girls don't play sports. Girls don't climb trees, they don't fall and skim their knees running around in the graveled backyard, this, that, and the other thing. And so I kind of felt like my passion was already being stifled a little bit. But my dad, he was supportive. He still wanted to push me towards soccer. So in Portland, we have University of Portland, which has a really phenomenal women's soccer program. So he would take me to these games as a little girl. And this was when, if anyone's familiar, Eminem were playing. So this is Shannon McMillan and Tiffany Milbritt, who both ended up playing on the US national team. So we would go to these games, and the weather's not great, but the stands would be packed. And so as a young kid, watching these women play a sport that they loved, and then watching a whole group of folks showing up on a cold day, a wet day, having blankets on to cheer for these women, I was inspired. And then my dad continued to take me to these UP games, and then it was the Rapinoe sisters, Christine Sinclair. And then the Thorns showed up and kind of redefined what fandom looks like for women's sports. And so, again, I was reminded in my hometown of Portland that people loved women's sports, that they showed up. Then we had the ABL. The Portland Power came through with professional women's basketball. I went to those games and I thought, this is it. This is our time. It's happening for us. I'm gonna play pro ball. Because prior to that, I was born right on the tail end after the Portland Trail Blazers had won a championship. So I had Clyde Drexler posters, Jerome Kersey posters, Buck Williams. I went to Jansen Beach to go get, Terry Porter's autograph. I had a jersey with Clyde Drexler's name on it. So up until the ABL showed up, all I saw was men's basketball. And so that's all I could dream about. So I went to a private school, and I remember shooting hoops and, playing with the boys, and there was 2 sisters that were on the sidelines, and they'd be like, we'll see you in the NBA. And so I had this big vision, this big dream. I go to this ABL game, thousands of people show up. I'm like, this is it. This is our time. The ABL folds into the WNBA. We get the Portland Fire. Thousands of people show up. I buy season tickets with my dad. We go to these games and we realize that Portland has the largest hometown crowd of any WNBA team. and yet 2 years later, it folds. And so I think to myself, this is it. And then I remember driving down, or like having my dad drive me down away from what is now the Moda Center. And there was a Portland Fire thing painted on a brick wall. And I remember when they folded, I watched as they painted over it. And it felt like the dream had been crushed in a way. Anyway, fast forward a little bit, and I continue to play basketball. It becomes my entire identity. I sleep with the basketball. I try to take my driving test with a basketball on my lap. Driving teacher's like, no, that's not cool. I go to the mall with my friends, and I'm like spinning a basketball. Like, this is how much I love basketball. And I play in high school. I'm pretty good, but I'm not really that good. It's not like Stanford's coming for me. I did send a video though, so. So there's this like slight delusional. So anyway, I find out that there's a recruiter at one of my senior high school basketball games, and I'm like, oh my gosh, awesome. Later on, I find out it's from a local community college. And afterwards, they want to give me a scholarship. It was $400. But all I hear is I'm playing basketball in college. And meanwhile, my friends are, talking to the school counselor, trying to find their college that they're going to, deciding which track to be in. My parents are leaning hard on, there's really only 3 things: doctor, lawyer, engineer. Anything else is like, don't do it. So they're kind of pushing me in this direction. I'm just thinking basketball, basketball. So anyway, I get this scholarship, I'm stoked. I start lifting weights, I start like running track and trying to get my body ready. And it's an open gym, 2 weeks before my first freshman basketball game. Having a good time, and I full on blow out my ACL. And it was almost like you see your entire life flash before you, like not to be over dramatic. But I thought, what am I now? Who am I now? And so I was 19, and 2 years prior, I came out to my friends and family. And that was really hard. So in this kind of tumultuous period of time, I went into kind of a downward spiral. My parents were the closest people to me. I felt like I created a wedge. I picked fights where there weren't any. And I just had to leave. I had to get out of the house. So I went away to college, and I wanted to go as far away from my parents as possible, but they still had to afford it, so I stayed in state. So my sophomore year, I moved up to Bellingham, Washington. Okay, now we're talking. So I go up to Bellingham, and I'm grasping at straws, trying to figure out who I am without basketball. And I didn't know what I wanted to be, and so when I had to fill out all this paperwork, I just checkmarked the box pre-med. I was like, you know what, I'm okay at school. I don't have my own dreams. I'll be what my parents want me to be. That's it. Pre-med, started going to biochem classes. I'm having a hard time. But the hardest time was I was homesick. But not homesick in the way that's very traditional. I was homesick for home cooking. I really missed my mom's cooking. And so I call her one day and I'm just like, Mom, can I get your recipe for thịt kho? So thịt kho is traditionally a pork butt, cut up, braised in coconut milk, fish sauce, brown sugar, more black pepper than you think. And she's just like, I'm sorry, is this Jenny, my daughter? Because literally, I had never had any interest in cooking back home. Mom was always trying to get me to help her in the kitchen. She'd be like, pick this bag of green beans before you go out and play basketball. And I'd just pick them and pick a third of them, and then be like, these are done, and then I'd go and shoot hoops. So mom was really shocked. She was just like, what's happening? And I go, the food here isn't great. I really miss thịt kho. And I knew that if I made a pot, it would last me a week. So anyway, my dorm room shared a wall with the dorm kitchen. And I started cooking thịt kho, and then I called mom and asked for more recipes. Then I started watching Food Network, and then I started going to the library and checking out cookbooks. And it was all in my way of trying to cope with school and dating, maybe, like a little bit of dating. And then I met this woman, and she was wonderful. And she goes, Jenny, you know, I feel like the only time I ever see you be yourself is when you're on the basketball court or when you're in the kitchen. And I go, huh. I loved being in the kitchen. I loved cooking. I would lose time in there. Hours would go by. There were times where I cooked for the entire floor or the entire dorm for fun. 7-course meals. I thrived on it. And then she said that, and I was just like, interesting. Wonder what that's about. So about halfway through my sophomore year, she was just like, I think you should be a chef. That's what she told me. And I was like, oh no, I can't do that. My parents would literally kill me. I can't do that. Fast forward to the end of sophomore year, I call my parents. And you know, I'd been sweating it. I'd been sweating it real hard. I call them and I tell them that I don't want to be a doctor, that I want to be a chef. And I think the first time I called, Dad hung up. Full stop. So I call back and I'm like, listen, I think that this is what I want to do. And my dad, he ended up giving me what I think is the best advice ever, but also I think he said it as a way to like scare me, and it backfired. He said, Jenny, I want you to find the worst job you can think of in that field, do it for a year. And if by the end of that year, if you still want that to be your life, then go for it. And I was just like, okay. So my very first kitchen job, I went out and got it like 2 weeks after that phone call, was at Red Robin. Full on, Red Robin. So there's a position that they nicknamed the fryer boy position. And it was basically running the fryers. And people didn't last in that position very long because it was filthy, greasy, like high level stress. And the moment I started there, the moment that ticket machine was cranking, I was hooked. So anyway, a year plus goes by. I move up pretty quickly at Red Robin. I make a deal with my parents that I will graduate college, but in whatever I want. So I ended up graduating with a psych degree and creative writing minor, which is fascinating now. But yeah, so I graduate college, I move back to Portland, enroll in culinary school, and work full-time in some mom and pop restaurants downtown. And I start cutting my teeth. And meanwhile, I continue to play basketball, pick up basketball, open gyms, a little bit of league ball, and everybody I know and love and cherish is through basketball. So I work my way up through kitchens, and the entire time, as I'm getting better and better at doing what I do, folks are like, Jenny, when are you gonna open your own restaurant? I said, absolutely never. I don't love anything that much to work that hard. Like, I have no disillusions. I worked at mom and pop restaurants. I watched people abuse drugs, lose their kids, get divorced, sleep under the counter. Like, no, that is not for me. I want to clock in, clock out. So I continue 15 years plus working my way up through kitchens to eventually becoming the executive chef at Reed College. And I get this thing that I have never seen before, PTO, And it's amazing. So I'm just like, okay, I get 2 weeks off. First time ever I'm taking a vacation. And I decide to go to Vietnam with my parents. And it's my first time going. And I have no intention of it being anything other than great food, eat my way through Vietnam, and see where my parents grew up. But I get there, and it changes everything. I see people sharing in community. I see people sharing birthdays, weddings, deaths, pre-coffee, post-coffee, work. Everything is happening in community. And I realize that I have been working and working and working 80 to 100 hours a week, not seeing my friends or family. I love what I do, but I become my work. I'm changed by what community looks like. And for the first time ever, I feel like I'm missing that back home. So I come home and I put my notice in. I give my 3 months notice, I do a good job, and I train up somebody. I don't just walk out. But the company that I was working for had big plans for me. So everybody was asking me, Jenny, what are you gonna do? What's your plan? And I didn't know. I just knew that I needed to change. So I figured that something would just hit me on the head and that I would be like, oh, that's it. 5 years later, I am still unemployed. Happily unemployed, mind you. I'd basically gone into like an early retirement. I was in my pajamas all the time. If I needed any extra cash to like travel or buy something, I picked up jobs off Craigslist. I did Postmates. I just did random stuff to make ends meet. I simplified my life. I was happy. I saw my friends, my family. You know, unfortunately, I had some family drama that needed a lot of attention, and I could give it. So I felt like I had purpose there. So I spent the next 5 years unemployed, but enjoying myself. And then 2020 happened. The pandemic happened. And everything shifted. But what really kind of stuck out to me was watching basketball. For those of you who don't know, the WNBA played that year in a bubble. And those 144 women playing the sport that they loved, they also stood on business. They spoke up and they spoke out. They were changing the world from within a bubble through the sport that they loved. And I thought to myself, oh my God. I was inspired. I was like, I want to do more. I want to help. How can I do this? How can I help? What am I good at? And I started to like grow increasingly frustrated with myself because I sat on my laurels for 5 years and now I wanted to do something and I was just like, it felt like too late. And I thought about what am I good at? Playing basketball and cooking? Where do those two things fit? And you know, a couple years prior to that, my friends and I, all basketball players, we always went to sports bars to, you know, pre-game, post-game, celebrate a birthday, whatever. We just wanted to watch women's sports in, like, as a group and like celebrate, drink a little, eat a little. And every time it was like a compromise. There was always something compromising. Whether we would sit down, order a bunch of food, and they wouldn't change the channel because football was on or something. Or, you know, my vegan friends had nothing they could eat. Or, you know, this, that, and the other thing. And so, you know, Brian had it almost right. It was the NCAA Women's Finals Championship basketball game in 2018. And we had gotten like 14 people together, cobbled some tables together. I asked the server if we could watch this basketball game. She's like, absolutely. And she changed the smallest TV in the whole bar. And so we just piled over there and we watched this game, and it ended up being a the most magical game I'd ever seen. It was like a 20-point deficit with a couple minutes left, come back from behind, last second three-pointer to win it all. And we were all just celebrating so hardcore. We were celebrating, and then as we were leaving, I told my friend, I go, that is literally the best game I've ever seen in my life. And she goes, man, can you imagine if we watched it with the sound on? And right then, I was pissed. I was mad at myself because, one, I had become so accustomed to watching women's sports as like a secondary that I hadn't even noticed that we'd watched this incredible, biggest game of the year with no sound on. And so out of frustration, I looked at her and I just blurted out, the only way we'll ever watch women's sports the way it deserves is if we had our own place. So this was 2018. I blurted it out. I didn't mean anything by it, other than I was mad at the situation. The next day I'm driving around and I was just like, if we had our own place, what would we call it? And the very first name that came to mind was the sports bra. And because I thought to myself, it's a sports bar. All we're gonna do is we're gonna change the channel. So it's the tiny change that can make all the difference. And so I took sports bar, switched those two letters around, sports bra. I laughed out loud to myself. I thought I gave myself a high five. This was 2018, and then so I went home, told my girlfriend, we told our friends, and then it became a running joke. So for years it was a running joke. Anyway, fast forward, pandemic, I'm wondering what to do with myself and my life. Millions of people are dying. What can I do to help? And my girlfriend, she looks at me and she goes, hey, you know how you always joke about the sports bra? I was like, yeah. She goes, why don't you do that? And I literally laughed in her face. Because one, I never once imagined the bra to be a real thing. Two, the entire world is turned upside down, on fire, people are dying. What difference would a bar that focuses on women's sports make? And then I started to think about Portland, my hometown, the city that I grew up loving and adoring, and the way that Portland was shown to the world during the pandemic felt so incredibly skewed. In Portland, during the pandemic, I witnessed thousands of people showing up for each other, doing beautiful things, creating beautiful things, but none of that stuff was showing up in mainstream media. And so I thought about, okay, maybe the sports bra can help shine a little light on this community and add a little more joy to my hometown. And little by little, this onion started to peel back these layers of maybe the sports bra can have some impact. Anyway, I got to the point where I was going to bed thinking about the sports bra, waking up thinking about the sports bra, writing notes on pieces of paper about this. It became all-encompassing, and I was like, oh my God, okay, I either have to do something about it or I have to let it go. Because there was no living like this double life. So I came to this, the proverbial fork in the road. And here is one road where I'm retired. I stay in my pajamas all day if I want to. No boss, no pressure. And here's this completely other road, which is like the opposite. And if anyone's thinking about going from 5 years of not working to opening your own small business, highly don't recommend. So I was at the fork in the road, and honestly, I was leaning towards comfort and safety. But it was one conversation that kind of flipped the switch for me. And again, it was me and my girlfriend just sitting around having some beers. And I said to her, man, can you imagine if our parents had taken us to a place like the sports bra when we were kids? What if we were 7 years old and our parents were just like, hey, I know you love basketball. I want to take you to this bar. And I just thought, what it would feel like to walk into a space and see grown-ass women up on TV playing the sport that I love, and then also to look around and see people cheering for those women playing the sport that they love. What would that mean to me as a kid, as a 7-year-old? How would I feel, how would I have been impacted? How will I have felt seen or represented in that space? And I don't know if it's me or if it's humans or women, but if I'm walking down the street and somebody yells out like something mean, I'm not gonna do anything about it. I'm gonna be like, eh. But if I'm walking down the street with a friend and somebody yells out the window something mean to them, oh, I'm chasing that car down. We're gonna have some words. But what happened was weird. I had stopped thinking about how opening the sports bra was gonna affect me and change my life and like make everything real hard. And I started to think about the impact that it could have on somebody else, like the young version of myself. And at that moment, I was like, I have to do this. And it felt less like a choice and more like a responsibility. And so at that moment, I decided to go all in. So the sports bra, you know, I think they asked me to have some takeaways for this. And I think that there are a couple things. One is that I think we're living in a time where it can feel really hopeless and really overwhelming because the problem seems so big and we as individuals feel so small. But when I think about the small change, whether it's the letter in the sports bra or changing the channel, that small change created a massive impact. And so when I think about women's sports and the trajectory that we're on right now, I think one, I remember growing up wearing a Clyde Drexler jersey. And now when I go to Irving Park in Portland, I see boys and girls and all kinds of folks wearing Asia Wilson jerseys, Caitlin Clark jerseys, Sabrina Ionescu's shoes. And I think about how much inspiration I drew from being in those crowds of people cheering early on for University of Portland players, for the Thorns, for the ABL, the WNBA, and now Portland's bringing back the WNBA. So I would inspire all of you guys, if you want to make a difference in women's sports, you can start by buying tickets to games, buying merch, asking folks to change the channel. If you're at a hotel and you're staying somewhere and all you see is men's sports on the TVs, look at a schedule. If there's a women's sports game on, which I'm sure there will be, have them change the channel. Like all of that helps to normalize this movement, this epic movement that is so much more than just women's sports. There's like this, the cross where women and sports, where those two align, it explodes into an entire universe. It's like a cultural shift. And people talk to me about the shift in women's sports or the shift in sports. It's actually a cultural shift in everything. And the more we push that, the more towards equity we can drive. And so, you know, I guess my takeaway is buy tickets, buy merch, but with this whole story, I think that there is this level of me choosing my authentic path. And it felt a lot less like a choice and a more like I have to do this. And it was hard and it was delayed, at times super delayed, but that it mattered. And so my ask is that each and every one of you show up in your most authentic self, because that is what the world needs. And I think that you've heard other speakers talk about authenticity and individual thought. And like, you know, like Rory said, not being a lemming. And it's hard and frustrating and scary, but it is absolutely worth it. Thank you. Thank you.